I want to read from a Real Progressives article here. This is about inflation. This is from a month ago, but it does still apply. And again, realprogressives.org, you guys, if you want to find fantastic content like this, we have articles, we have podcasts, all sorts of stuff for you. This is from Artemis Salisbury. Don't call it inflation. It's capital retaliation. Capitalists have one motive, profit. It doesn't matter to them what the real costs are to regular people or the planet itself. They use their control of production, including media, to sell regular people on false notions of markets and free trade. The capitalists claim that allowing the teeniest fraction of humanity themselves to hoard the value the rest of us create, as well as determine the outcomes and direction of our labor and production, is not only acceptable, but somehow desirable, freeing, and inevitable. Of course, capitalism in any form is none of the above for the 99% and our planet. The freedom capitalists preserve is their freedom to exploit resources, oppress and divide people, and convert the living green earth into dead bricks of luxury. And it takes a great deal of narrative management and indoctrination to achieve this relatively static status quo. When those same markets tip in favor of workers, no matter how briefly or insignificantly, the capitalists cry out and use their apparatus in media, government, and private institutions to retaliate at the slight against their perceived or projected possible gains. This is the material force behind the surge of labor shortage and now inflation propaganda being hammered over all outlets controlled or influenced by capitalists, which is virtually all outlets that exist. And a tweet here from Stephanie Kelton. Can the U.S. government run out of U.S. dollars? Can a soccer stadium run out of points? Until people figure out the parallel, austerity comes. That is the mechanism that allows all of this to be. Yes, prices are rising. No, it is not inflation. Inflation is so often used, really misused, as a boogeyman that common perception of the word's meaning and what the impact and cause of inflation is completely out of alignment with reality. The federal government creates its currency, the US dollar, and then creates a tax obligation for users of that currency in order to create demand and value in the dollar. Federal spending is the birth of all existing dollars, known as the money supply, and federal taxation is the death of some of those dollars. The remaining dollars in supply become the deficit and debt. But this debt isn't owed to anyone. It's the other side of the balance sheet. Guys, understand, every debt is someone else's surplus. So when we fearmonger about the national debt, we're fearmongering about our own surplus, our own money supply. If the national debt were wiped out, there would be none of the US dollars left, leaving no money in anyone's hands. It can't run out of dollars any more than a carpenter can run out of inches. That's a great quote from Stephanie Kelton. You guys, dollars are just, it's a measurement. It's a unit of account. Capital flight is one form of capital retaliation where the parasitic owning class will depart from a region, taking with them their investments and accumulated wealth due to a relative increase in their tax burden at the municipal or state level. This is also called the race to the bottom. There are plenty of other forms of capital retaliation, however. There's also corporate lobbying, as well as both corporate and individual contributions to politicians, PACs, and nonprofits by the managers in the middle class and their owners in the capitalist class. Making nonprofit work dependent on grants and contributions from the wealthy kneecaps the range of impact a given nonprofit can have. Further, when local, state, and federal grants and other funding mechanisms are appointed to individual capitalists or their private organizations to steward and direct the flow of public funding into not-for-profit organizations, this only compounds the control capitalists have over the public and the level they can corrupt public works and the very notion of the public purpose. In real time, Americans are experiencing capital retaliation in the form of increased punitive policies to force the working class to work for less, propaganda about a labor shortage that includes an unspoken but ever-present mandate that workers need to do their part to preserve the boss's profits or the economy or national well-being. Additionally, there is an increasingly aggressive campaign to redefine labor relations by urbanizing all work. By Uberizing all work, the ride sharing and all that. All work and economic relationships. This campaign is being waged in order to reduce workers' power before the nascent labor awakening turns into a militant labor movement. Add to all this the deliberate spiking of prices for basic needs like groceries, gasoline, rent, and utilities, while capitalists are using While capitalists are using capitalist control of institutions in the media to say the rise in prices is nothing other than inflation. When combined, a clear and aggressive campaign of class unity among the capitalists becomes apparent. Not only do capitalists have unity as a class, they also have a unifying purpose, profits, and the resources to further their control of everyone and destruction of everything. Quote, "Goodbye, Bill. I die like a true blue rebel. Don't waste any time in mourning Organize. That's a famous quote from Joe Hill before he was executed. In reality, when you break down the rise in prices, we're not seeing inflation. We're seeing the natural outcome of markets when supply chains are squeezed, production costs go up, so goods are sold at a premium. Further, we're likely seeing an artificially added fee being figured into those increased costs to punish working people for the market tipping ever so slightly in their favor. This is the capital retaliation fee, and that's what we were talking about earlier with Kroger boasting about how they're basically making consumers pay for this and then some. The fee would be the addition, right? They're just money grabbing. In other words, the owners are punishing the rest of us using their control of the means of production and the markets in which the products of the working class's labor are distributed. They seek to depress our wages and force us to give up the very slight gains in class awareness and labor militancy while raising the prices on the very things we need to survive. They want to make us believe these price increases are the fault of the government for throwing a few breadcrumbs our way. Those breadcrumbs being stimulus checks and enhanced unemployment benefits. If we let the portion of the ruling class who advocate for fully paid for federal policy win their so-called balanced budget, there would be $0 left over at the end of each year. That is the only way to eliminate the deficit. Tax 100% of the dollars created in a given year out of existence. Worse still, in order to eliminate the national debt, policy would have to be crafted that would effectively tax everyone at more than 100% in order to wholly destroy the money supply. Again, the national debt is a running total of all dollars created since the beginning of the country, minus the dollars destroyed through federal taxation. In other words, the only way to eliminate the national debt is to leave zero or even a negative balance of money in everyone's hands. Regardless of what the media tries to tell us, there are only two real-world reasons prices are rising at this time: distribution to the supply chain and capital retaliation. And then the sources are listed. Great work from Artemis there. And again, I want to encourage everybody to go to realprogressives.org to find other fantastic content, political, economic, and otherwise educational, etc. So understand, I really want everyone to understand. Inflation is, I think Walker Bregman tweeted this out the other day, right? As more people understand that debt and deficit fear-mongering is nonsense, they're going to turn to fear-mongering about inflation. That's just the natural sort of transition, okay? And I do want to be clear, MMT acknowledges that inflation is a constraint on spending. But I also want to be clear that we're nowhere near reaching that being a problem. We're nowhere near full employment, so we can't be anywhere near true inflation. So it's not that inflation is not real. It's not that inflation is not something to consider. It's that is not what is happening right now, and you are being misled by the press and by the corporate overlords into thinking it is, so that you'll oppose said breadcrumbs, the stimulus checks, etc. The idea that $1,200 going to each person created massive inflation is so ludicrous and outrageous. And yet mainstream economists will tout that shit. The mainstream press will tout that. And then the Krogers of the world will use it as an excuse to further price gouge their customers while they continue to neglect their workers and close stores. They want it both ways, you guys. And when they can't have it both ways, they throw a fucking temper tantrum. So when the markets are such that there is even the slightest bit of leverage that workers have, they throw a temper tantrum. When they can't exploit their workers to the maximum degree, they whine and cry and bitch about it. It's pathetic. It's pitiful. And yet, unfortunately, a great deal of people tend to fall for this kind of shit. So great work again from Artemis, you guys. And I just want to make sure that my audience understands that what we're seeing right now is not a result of overspending or anything close. Okay. We have another